welcome to Rock Against Racism in Nottingham. We're representing Birmingham and London. Rhoda's travelled from Brighton, I've travelled from London. And for the next hour, we're going to complement the music that you've been listening to so far, the DJing you're going to hear later, with some conversation about the roots of Rock Against Racism.
Yeah.
So, and introducing myself, my name is Daniel Rachel. I was a former musician and then I became an author. And one of the books I wrote was about the history of Rock Against Racism.
Hang on, weren't you a dramaturg in there for a while? Or do we not talk about that?
It's not really relevant.
Well, I think it is. It's that, isn't it? He's a dramaturg.
All right, director at the National Assistant Director.
You see, I think that's better than having been in a band that no one's heard of.
I mean, that's because you had your own acting background at the...
No, it's not. It's not that. If you have had, what was it? The National Theatre, you said. Yeah. I mean, I think that's quite important. For me, that's more important than saying, oh yeah, I was in a band you've never heard of, but I also did a bit of directing at the National Theatre.
Hamilton did a bit. But anyway, so I wrote a book about Rock Against Racism and its progression into Red Wedge in the mid-1980s. And most recently I wrote a history of two-tone records. So, from doing the research to Rock Against Racism, and please excuse me if you have this knowledge already, but for the benefit of people that don't know, Rock Against Racism was formed pretty much as a direct reaction to Eric Clapton standing on a stage in August 1976 at the Birmingham Odeon, where he identified the members of the audience, 2,000 plus, who were not white. He asked them to raise their hands, and having identified those people, he told them to get out of the country and get back where they belonged. He used stark language of the day, using abusive language, and he repeated these kind of phrases and racist abuse throughout his concert. And that concert generated reaction. And one of those reacting to it was a man called Red Saunders. And he wrote a letter and it got published. He sent it to 4 different places and it got published in a music paper. And he called out Eric Clapton for his abject racism. And he suggested that we need a rank and file movement against the racist poison in rock music. And he put a P.O. box address and encouraged people to get in contact. And he got an avalanche of handwritten letters, all saying, whatever you're doing, I want to be part of it. And that avalanche of letters grew and grew, and people phoned up Red Saunders from Aberystwyth, they phoned him up from Newcastle, they phoned him up from Birmingham, from all quarters of the United Kingdom, and they said, I want to be part of Rock Against Racism. And Red had one simple response: you are now Rock Against Racism. You go and form it in Aberystwyth, you go and form it in Newcastle, you go and form it in Birmingham. And as a result, Rock Against Racism from grassroots took over the United Kingdom wherever somebody wanted to set up an organisation. Meantime, Red set up a little group of people. There were no more than 5 of them. One of them was 17. It was her first job. She worked at CNA, and she came and joined Rock Against Racism. And from this little cohort of people, they started putting on gigs. And again, the gigs happened nationwide. From the gigs came rallies, came massive concerts and one-day festivals. And in a moment I'm going to ask Rhoda about her experience of one of those festivals. Rock Against Racism lasted from that moment in August 1976 to July 1981, when the Specials, who were at #1 with Ghost Town, with Rhoda Dakar performing live with the band, they put on their last gig in Leeds. Rhoda was at that concert, so it's something else we'll talk about. In that 5-year period, 76 to 81, I would say that they turned a youth generation from wanting to fight the kind of rhetoric that David Bowie was talking about, that Adolf Hitler was the first rock and roll superstar. We need somebody like him to lead this country. Proclaiming Enoch Powell as the man to do it. To Rod Stewart saying that there was too many foreigners in the country that needed to be sorted out. There was a thing brewing up in rock music that Rock Against Racism called out. And they did it on the stage of music, and they did it with agitprop through a magazine called Temporary Hoarding. And it had a profound effect, I would say, on people, on a youth generation. At the same time as Rock Against Racism, 1979, 3 years after its formation, Two Tone formed. And Red Saunders said he couldn't believe it when he saw Two Tone, because it was what he imagined Rock Against Racism might be. And in many ways he said, here's the mantle, take it on. And it coexisted, as I say, until that concert in 1981. So that's a kind of a very broad sweep. But Rhoda, when would you have first been aware of Rock Against Racism? Give us yeah.
I don't remember. It's a long time ago, Daniel.
Do you think it would have been reading music press? Would it have been seeing gigs being organised, banners?
It wouldn't have been gigs being organised. No, it would have been in the music papers.
Yeah.
I think it would have been, because I used to have a. Did I just given it up? I actually had I used to get NME every week saved for me at the newspaper shop, and I think I'd started to give it up because they didn't really like punk. So I was in the punk corner, and I didn't really like the fact that they didn't like it. So I kind of gave it up a bit. So I probably didn't know about it as soon as I might have done. I was also at school, so, you know, let's be honest, I was at school and that was kind of my focus.
In 76, 77?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, even I was at school back then.
Yeah, I don't know the precise age, whatever, actually.
I think it's 65, Daniel.
Okay, so...
And it's on an August birthday, so I left school when I was 17, but quite soon after I was 18. 77.
At least half of the Sex Pistols, and you're in and around that scene, but you're dressed in a modish style at this point?
What, in 76?
Well, no, let's say broadly,
What date?
Let's say 78, let's get into it.
Yeah, but you see, you can't, because 77,
Yeah.
Knox and the Vibrators was saying to me, I can't believe you're still wearing bondage trousers.
Okay.
So by 78, that's when I started dressing in like 60s clothes. Because I got bored of wearing punk clothes.
Okay.
And I changed, that's when I changed to wearing 60s clothes. But to be honest, it wasn't that different.
You're very actively political as in the 80s, but not so at this point.
No, look, the thing is, we're talking 1978, yeah. Right? So 1978, I'd been left school about a year, and I worked at the Young Vic. I worked in theatre.
Yeah.
So
Doing
I worked in the wardrobe department.
Yeah.
So I was literally at work all the time.
Okay.
And occasionally on a Sunday I would have a day off, but not always, because sometimes we had to go in on a Sunday. So I went from being at school to maybe having a summer where I didn't do much, to then just being at work.
Yeah.
So literally it kind of took all my time. So I was political. I had been political when I was at school, but I didn't really have anywhere to be political while I was working full time.
Okay.
So my mates who I saw from the march that came past my house, my two mixed race mates from school, because literally in my year at school there were 3 of us. And when I say mixed race 3, there were 5 black girls in my school when I went there.
So of the 5 of you, including yourself,
yeah,
the idea of Rock Against Racism, is that something that you're going to applaud, be sceptical about?
No.
How are you going to sit with that?
I mean, you know, it's like, it's nice when white people are on your side. It's how I looked at it. Yeah, right. It's nice of you to be on my side. But I didn't feel like you know, I mean, I don't know, there was some sense that people wanted me to feel grateful. I didn't feel grateful. It's like, I didn't feel anti-racism. It's the very least you could do after the way you have behaved. So I don't walk around saying, oh, I'm really glad that you suddenly realise that you're complete bastards for hundreds of years. It's like, you know, it didn't hit me like that. I was like, okay, good. So we're making a little move forward. Well, then I'll walk with you.
So some black artists of the period, and Linton Kwesi Johnson comes to mind, originally rejected Rock Against Racism. They didn't think it was for them. They thought it might be patronising. It was a white people thing that they wanted to get on with. He switched and when he saw what Rock Against Racism was achieving, and backed it. And I think that most British reggae artists who were black that I spoke to all backed. So that'd be members of Steel Pulse, of Aswad, of Matumbi, and of course Aswad played the concert that you went to, as well as Elvis Costello. Now, an interesting thing, the lead singer of Aswad was Brinsley Ford, and Brinsley told me that at that period it was very common that black people would not go to a gig that was white bands and where white people would go. They would only go to a gig where black people were going to be. And so the idea of a massive park with 150,000 people, he said that was quite extraordinary for them as a band, because one, people were going to hear reggae as it's meant to be heard, with big PAs, big sound. And it was quite a shocker because there's a ton of white people watching them perform. As somebody of mixed race, mixed heritage, were you going to one or other gig, or both, if white bands were playing, black bands were playing? Did you make that differential choice?
Don't see a soul artist, absolutely fine. That was the most mixed community that there was as regards, you know, kind of little groups.
You say a soul club, do you mean somebody playing records or like
Both, either or both. That was very mixed, and you could be anywhere, and you could be who you wanted, dressed how you wanted, you were accepted. But if you go and see a reggae band now, that was no. That was a no. And the first reggae band I ever saw was the Cimarrons, who are now obviously being spoken about. But I didn't see them in London. I saw them in Edinburgh when I went to the Edinburgh Festival after I left school. So that's when I saw my first reggae band live.
Yeah, and there's a documentary that's just been completed about the Cimarrons. The Cimarrons were the band that pretty much played back so many Jamaican artists when they played in the UK. It's a really great documentary to get an impression of who they were and why they've not really been remembered very well, perhaps up until now. So on that bill, Sham 69 were meant to play that massive carnival, and the lead singer Jimmy Percy got a death threat. And he got a death threat because his band had been attracting a fascist neo-Nazi following. You can see footage of Sham 69 in 78, and the whole audience, it seems, are Sieg Heiling. And Jimmy Percy played a dangerous game where he believed that to change attitude, bring everybody in, and then I'll change the attitude. So as a result, he had a problem at hand, not a dissimilar attitude to what Madness had. If you want a Lancer Boyle, it needs to be there, says Chas Smass of Madness, not 200 miles away. Get it there and let's deal with it. So Sham 69, lead singer Jimmy Percy, doesn't want to really come out either way what he's thinking. But then he decides to back Rock Against Racism. And when he announces his band are going to play at Brockwell Park, gets the death threat. So Sham pull out. But somebody says to Sham goes back to his place in East London, Essex, and they just say that he's a coward and he's incensed. So he goes up to Brockwell Park, goes out on the stage and makes a statement and declares himself a Rock Against Racism. To fill in for Sham 69, an unknown band from Northern Ireland come over and fill the spot, and they're called Stiff Little Fingers. Elvis Costello headlines, and as we said, Aswad are on the bill as well. Can you cast your mind back to that day? Are there any memories of the music? Any memories of impressions you can give, flavour of the event, the enormity of the amount of people, the music, the different changes between punk, between reggae, anything like that? No.
I don't remember. I remember Elvis Costello playing, because that's who I'd gone to see, essentially. I was a big fan of Elvis Costello, so I'd gone to see Elvis Costello. And as it had gone past my house, as I said, rude not to, because I supported the idea.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was going to be a while, I thought, before any changes were going to be made. And politically, I'm a pragmatist, right? Mm. So I am on the left, but I am a pragmatist. So the notion is, if something looks like it's going to work, then I'm happy to support it, but I'm not going to break my neck to support it unless it's clearly working. And in 1978, I had no idea whether that was going to make any difference. Mm. 150,000 people came out to see all these bands. Because the thing is, if you play for free, 150,000 people will come out and see all those bands. That's the truth. It's like,
but only 80,000 come in April.
Yeah, but that's because it's in Vicky Park.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't understand. I know nobody would go. Why would you go to Victoria Park
Because
if you're from the rest of?
No.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but what part of? Are you a Londoner?
But what's more?
Yeah, what part of London? North
Well, there
London.
you are. That's where
we
we go.
see. Yeah.
But what's more important, Rhoda,
Yeah.
is that the reason why that concert was called for September 1978 was because it looked like Jim Callaghan was going to call the election then, and they wanted to coincide and the election with it. And it's largely, but historically believed that Callaghan basically bottled it and waited till September 79. So that's why it's happening, to try and influence the crowd. Now, do you remember, just weeks before, Margaret Thatcher appeared on World in Action as the leader of the opposition, and she talked about, does the quote come to my mind, about basically an alien culture invading our country, and she was trying to lure a National Front vote towards the Conservative. Would any of that played into your thinking at that point? Either what the Conservative Party represented or would become, or that there was an incremental rise of the National Front at the ballot box throughout the 70s, and it was pretty high by 78, with councillors in London that were National Front.
I mean, honestly, as I said, I was at work or I was with my mates. So the world that went on around me in 1978 wasn't anything to do with me.
Right.
I had my feelings and I had my thoughts about politics, but I was involved in my work, and I was doing my bit in my corner of the world. So I was aware of Thatcher, but I didn't take her seriously. No,
How are you going to couch that?
No, I'm not going to say anything. There were members of the band essentially, we had a band. There was me and there was 6 white girls, and these 6 white girls went from people who didn't have a lot, who grew up, not that different from me, to one of whom her father had his own plane. So these aren't people that I would necessarily meet or hang out with. We were all in a band together, we were thrown together. So our politics was different. It was disparate and different, and there were people who didn't have to care about politics because they were fine.
So you're in a band that have got a mix of class differences and educational background differences.
And intelligence, if we're being honest, as well.
And the fact that Two-Tone very much represented a mirror to society in many ways. If you talk to Pauline Black, Pauline will say, we wrote about street issues because we had just come...
Aspire to being anti-sexist, and back then I'm talking about in the 70s, they could all aspire to being anti-sexist, but what what it would actually mean, and the shift in ideas and understanding and behaviour and belief systems that would have required wasn't going to happen.
But people would look at you
Yeah.
and the colour you are fronting the body
Yeah.
snatchers, writing your own lyrics, your
Yeah.
own songs. People would look at Pauline Black
Yeah.
of mixed heritage, fronting her own band and sometimes writing her own lyrics, and see that as a major advancement in kind of how music was changing. Did you recognise that?
Not that they're letting me sing. No, Daniel, because
Well, it's not that nobody's letting you. It's that
well,
it's
yes,
now
but
that
that's what it looks like, doesn't it? Oh, now, look, you get to front band. It's not, look,
no, it's
lots
not,
of women,
organic.
lots of black women have fronted bands or sung with bands and have had no power.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is power.
Okay.
That's what you're talking about, is the power element. What power did I have as a black woman fronting a band?
By the act of doing it.
Well, okay. But that to me is not, it's like just being here is changing something. Well, I do believe if you can't see it, you can't be it. I absolutely believe in that.
Mm.
So that's why I've always thought it's important to be an example by just being. But I honestly don't know how much that changed. It certainly influenced maybe the people who saw us, the people who came to watch us at the time. So there were black girls who came to see the band.
Yeah,
and so it would have made a difference. That would have made a difference.
Yeah, of course. And then that leads to being attacked. And the last minute of the song, Rhoda screams because the character in the song is being raped. That song was then released as a single after the Body Snatchers disbanded. And in fact, was the follow-up single to Ghost Town by the Special AKA. And it charted. Were you surprised it charted?
No, it didn't surprise me that it charted because every two-tone single charted, and then suddenly they didn't anymore. But no, it didn't surprise me that it charted. I think my surprise was that I got to perform it live on BBC.
Oxford Roadshow.
Oxford Roadshow.
Yeah.
I mean that was a surprise. That I
What
hadn't
time did that
expected.
go out, roughly?
7, maybe.
7?
Yeah, it was early evening.
And was any of it cut?
No.
It's a complete performance?
No, because whatever you see on YouTube is what people have recorded off the telly.
And do you know where the invite came from? Is it a particular
No.
person within the programme?
I've no idea because obviously it came to the two-tone office and all I got was you be here at this time.
So kind of 7 o'clock on a weekday night,
Yeah.
you performed a spoken word piece
Yeah.
about male violence and rape.
Yeah, about date rape.
Yeah. And then you had a discussion with the presenter.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible position to be in, isn't it? To campaign against that issue, isn't it?
Well, had I been part of any campaign, it would have been. But essentially, I was just telling the truth as had, been told to me. I was just responding.
Yeah.
I wasn't there to I wasn't there to particularly talk about rape, especially because that was my own experience had only been through someone else. So it was.
Yeah. So what you did do was pick up on incidents of the day that were making that the media were writing about, and you'd use that as your performance as a means to then talk about the issue that was sometimes in the papers, sometimes on television.
Well, the friend who told me about this, I'd known her, by the time she told me, I'd known her like 10 years, maybe a bit longer actually. So we were old friends, so she had told me this, and I've never, I never named her or anything like that, so I don't think she ever thought it was, she wasn't ever upset that I had used the story. But, the thing is, if somebody comes up to me, well, even now, I suppose, but back then when somebody would come up to you and say, oh yeah, I was raped, it's like, well, what am I going to do about that, Like, I was a 20-year-old kid, what did I know? Well, have you contacted Rape Crisis, if it even existed back then?
Yeah.
That was really all I could do. I mean, I wasn't the person who was there. I wasn't a campaigner.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was a musician.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. What time is it now?
Oh, sorry. It's,
So is it celebration?
well, yeah, but you have to remember, this was the area where the Yorkshire Ripper had been.
Yeah.
So
Exactly there.
So yeah, so it was kind of like, it was there was a bit of a grim feeling, I think. Well, because there was this. I can't remember when the Yorkshire Ripper got caught, but there was still that kind of thing hanging over the area. And so then we were in Chapeltown. We do the gig, and there was some difference of opinion between Misty and Roots and Rico. I don't know what actually went on, because everyone claims thereafter is claiming different stories. But so we played that, and that was well, I mean, obviously the kind of people who come to see it are all, the anti-demo, the counter-demonstration doesn't turn up at the gig, so the gig is always fine.
60s, but 50s maybe. And I don't think it was Misty Roots. I think it was the Barry Ford band.
Yeah, I don't think it was Misty Roots. That doesn't make sense
No.
from the people that I know them to be.
But the sad fact is that after 2 solid years of two-tone, of trying to bring together, and Rico's a great figure in that, and has great representation because he's from Jamaica, and he's playing with a mix of white and black musicians, that he was affected enough by what happened backstage that he didn't play on Ghost Town.
Okay, so then that references back to the whole thing about me saying I wasn't welcome in like a black reggae establishment at that time. So that then references back to that. And so it shows you how entrenched the position was, that they would have a go at Rico, which is...
Yes. I mean, I spoke to the
ridiculous.
cigarettes and I raised the suggestion it was them, because they've
Yeah.
done so much.
They had.
I mean, they funded the first Ruts record, and they did so many Rock Against Racism records. But did you know Barry Ford band? I don't know any of them.
No,
No.
don't know anything about it.
Or you were at Rescue Rooms the other month when, the band now invites Stand Up to Racism to come along, and how do you envisage a new movement, a culture?
Well,
That's
you
very
see-
important.
A new movement today.
What, you see, I would say, were I Red Saunders, I would say, what are you going to do about it? It's basically, because racism is your problem, not mine.
Second two-tone started, and I think with a lot of people here, it was gripping. And it changed, the music changed, everything changed, and I was gripped by two-tone from its first note. But one of the great things in two-tone, I'm not just saying this because you're there, was when the Body Snatchers come out and did Rock Steady. That was magnificent. This record I listen to regularly still, two-tone is still great in everybody's, massive in everyone's life. And just to say, and I reckon I must be speaking on behalf of everybody in this room now, thanks a lot for coming down, and it's great just to be in the same room as you today.
That's very kind.
Yeah? Because let me finish that. You're not just Rhoda, you really are a legend. I said, you're not just Rhoda, you are a legend. Okay?
You now have a flavour of Rhoda Dakar. If you want to enhance that experience,